Hey everyone, and welcome to another one of our videos. Today I'm going to be showing you how to do a SYNC 2 to SYNC 3 upgrade on any of the 2013 or 2014 Ford F-150s, including the Raptors, that have the original SYNC 2 8-inch screen, and how to move that up to the upgraded SYNC 3, I believe it's version 3.4, 8-inch screen. So this is going to get you, obviously, the updated SYNC 3 interface, Apple CarPlay, Android Auto. Really the big reason I'm doing this is for the Apple CarPlay integration. Nothing's wrong with my SYNC 2 system. It works all right. It's dated, but it works all right. It's just a matter of convenience and Apple CarPlay for me. So I ended up purchasing, there's several vendors online out there that sell these kits. I ended up purchasing mine from SYNC Tech. And what it comes with is the updated SYNC 3 module, which has everything on the back side as well. A couple of brackets, because the variations that these come in are a couple different varieties, and this particular version needs different brackets, which are 3D printed by them, in order to install into the truck. And then it came with a generic GPS antenna, a little wiring harness module to go to the USB ports, and then a USB port module, combo module, which has USB-C and regular USB integrated into it. So I'm going to go ahead and hop into the truck, actually under the hood of the truck, because we're going to disconnect the battery, show you how to do that. I'm going to try to make a pretty clear, concise video for everybody, because the couple of the ones that I've seen online are fairly long, and hopefully this helps people out and get through this a little more efficiently. Go ahead and hop onto the hood of the truck and show you what we're going to do and how we're going to get started through this process. Alrighty, so here under the hood of the truck, really the first and only thing we need to do is disconnect the battery. It's just an 8mm, and all you're going to need to do is disconnect the negative battery terminal, as you can see, and then pull it off. And what I always like to do is tuck it up underneath the battery box here on these trucks. Now, in my case, I'm also going to pull off the positive terminal. I'm going to swap this heat barrier around here too, but that's no never mind to the SYNC 3 install. I'm going to go ahead and hop into the truck now and show you what we need to do to get started. But I will say, because we're going to be messing with airbags and stuff, I recommend waiting 15, 30 minutes, an hour, whatever you feel comfortable with, to let the electrical system discharge fully, to make sure that as we mess with airbags, you don't have any incidents happen. So I'm going to go ahead and wait that time period, and then come back and we're going to move forward. All right, so now that we're here on the interior, the first thing we need to do is get the passenger side glove box loosened up and get the passenger side airbag up here pulled out so we can start pulling center console trim pieces out of the way. This hides some screws that we need to get to and whatnot. So this is the first step in doing so. Now to do that, you just got to fold the glove box down. It's got these tabs on the side that you just push in on either side. And then up underneath here, you have 3 10mm bolts. One here, and then one here that hold in the airbag. So we're going to go ahead and pull all 3 of those out, and then we should be able to use a trim tool to pop the airbag out around the edges. The previous times that I've done this, I can't remember if I started at the top or the bottom, but you get a trim tool back behind here at the top, kind of face down inwards, and then from here at the bottom, just make sure that you're careful with pulling this out, because it can just kind of flop out and scratch up the dash. So we're going to do that, and then once we have it loose, we'll show you what the next step is. All right, so you can see we have the airbag loose here now. It is fully free, and like I'd mentioned, it can pretty easily scratch your dash. It's got these metal clips on the bottom that you can kind of see in there. I just wanted to show you, but that's the reason why you got to be careful. The bottom is what I ended up pulling out first, and then once I got worked up the sides enough, I just slipped my hands back on either side and pulled it straight out. And it kind of wants to lunge or launch out in a way. So that's why I say be careful. Otherwise you will scratch this bottom piece, which it looks like people have maybe done with the same thing in the past. But now that we got this loose, use both hands for just a sec. You can see why we pull this out. There are a couple copper screws holding on this dash trim right here. And we need to get that kind of folded out of the way, loose at the top and folded out of the way. So I'm gonna go ahead and remove those. We can start popping clips up here, and what we also need to do, just for a little bit extra movement, is to remove the bottom panel down here, right here on the side of the center console. If I let the airbag go, this panel right here, which just pulls out. I can probably show that on camera quite easily. So if we just pull this panel right here, work our fingers along the bottom side of it until we get that thing fully popped out of place. We really only need to get the front side out, You can leave it hanging in the back if you want to. And you can see why this matters. It hooks into the bottom of this trim piece here. I believe there's also a screw back behind here in the center console. If you want to get this fully off, you have to move the whole entire console back. I'm not going to do that. I've done this before on my other truck, and these will just kind of fold out of the way enough to be able to get access. So go ahead and get this guy popped loose, and we'll work on the other side. All right, so we have our trim piece right here popped out. I just want to mention and come back and cover, I ended up just pulling the airbag out. As long as you have your battery disconnected, you're not going to cause any problems. As long as you let the system discharge as well, nothing should happen. Always use best practices, keep the airbag pointed away from you when you're disconnecting, so on and so forth, or when you're working around it in general. But basically all you need to do is pinch the sides of this connector, pull it out, and then you have another one on this side, pinch and pull out. And then the airbag is loose at that point. These are all that's holding it in once you've unclipped it. So highly recommend that. That let me get enough hands and everything in here to be able to get this played around with and pulled. So you only have to take out one of these screws, by the way, 7mm, the copper screws, 7mm, pulls loose, and then you can see back behind here, there's some additional screws that we're gonna have to pull out to get the centerpiece out. We'll get to that in a minute. But this side is out, so add enough as far as it needs to go. So this side, we just basically need to get the overlapping trim that's adjacent to the trim here, that's adjacent to the trim here, all this overlaps each other, loose. So what we need to do is take out the 2 screws that are up in here in the gauge cluster panel. This is the safest and easiest way I found to do it. Those are 7mm, I believe. Let me double check. Yes, they are. So 7mm, and those just come straight down. Now, the easiest way I found to pop out this gauge cluster surround, which is all one piece and is the part that overlaps here, is just to get my fingers down here, down back behind. You can force them back there once you have the screws out, and pop this loose. So you force it loose down on the other side, and then run your fingers up on each side, and there's a clip kind of along right in here, and same on the other side in the corner, that hold the panel in place. Now, I've gotten those popped loose, and hopefully on camera I can show you pulling the piece out, which it looks like I can. And you don't need to fully remove it. I just like to pull it out enough to be able to get very comfortably to the back side of here. Now this piece, I believe, has no screws. Just double checking, that's what it looks like. And I do believe we should be able to start prying this loose as well. What I will do though is pull the side trim right here on the console out. Same issue as on the other side. You've got a clip that clips into the very bottom of here. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this kind of pried out, and should be in good shape to start removing the actual center stack. All right, so I'm kind of holding down here at the bottom with one hand, but I just want to show you. Just starting at the top with my fingers back behind here, started gently pulling, worked my way down to here, pulled from in here, and then just worked my way down the side. Like I'd mentioned, the side panel is popped loose. I've got a flashlight down in there to show you. It's popped loose. And now that this is popped loose, we have access to this screw back behind here, just like we do on the other side. And there's 2 more screws down at the bottom. Now, this bottom panel, super easy to pull out. It's just, you stick a pry tool in this area right here, and kind of pry it downwards. I can probably do this one one-handed on camera, because this one is quite easy, other than maybe pulling it out, because it may be a little bit of a pain to do that one-handed, although it looks like I can probably get it done. So there's 4 clips on this one. There's like 2 at the front and 2 towards the back, and I'm gonna go ahead and do this off camera just because I want to use both hands. On the normal F-150s, it's gonna be really easy. On the Raptors, it's gonna be a little harder to not scratch this because you have the switch panel here. So you use both hands, make sure I don't scratch it. If I need to, I'll pull the switch panel out, although I don't believe that's necessary, and we'll move on from there. All right, so we're now ready to remove the screws and pull out the console trim. You can see there's 2 7mm screws, one on either side. And then back behind, like I've shown earlier, there are 2 screws, one on either side here. Once those screws are removed, and you do have to remove all 4 of them, you can basically grab the console or center stack trim, kind of back behind along the sides, back along the bottom. The bottom is probably the easiest place to start since you can get a really good grasp here. And you're gonna start pulling it outwards. Should be pretty easy to remove. just keep in mind that there's going to be connectors back here. So you're going to need to remove connector for traction control. The radio will stay in place, and then you're going to have to remove some connections for the climate controls. But we'll go ahead and get this pulled out off camera and then show you the next step. All right, so we have now the entire center stack out. Before we go any further, just want to mention, now's a great time to start cleaning stuff back here as well, or as you finish up putting the new system in, because you're probably going to make a little bit more of a mess. But great time to clean stuff up back here, get back behind everything you can't reach to. There's some drinks that have been spilled down here and whatnot. So just want to mention that. Basically, at least on the Raptors, and the configuration is going to vary depending on what buttons you have up here, and if you have a center console or not. Things might be different down here, and you have the different switches down here too. So trucks are a little different, but specific to the Raptor at least, you've got two connectors that you got to pull out. This one's the sole one for the climate control, and it's just a clip on the bottom that you push in. And then this one's a little bit weird. It's got a clip that's encased in this little rectangular area, so you got to get like a nail in there, a thumbnail or fingernail, and pull that clip in towards the pins, so kind of sideways, and it'll pull out. That's for the traction control button on this truck. Again, things may be different on others. But now that we're to this point, we're ready to actually pull out the old sync system, and then we're gonna start getting ready to install the new sync system after that. So the old system is held in only by 4 bolts. I believe those are 8mm. I will double check that and confirm that once I have the system pulled out. And there's a couple connectors on the back. The GPS connector will just pull out, and then there's going to be a lever type connector that you flip the lever up on, and then it pulls out too for all the data. So going to go ahead and get this old one out, and then we'll move over to the bench and show you some differences and why we're doing exactly what we're doing in terms of some of the nuances of this. Okay, so we're back here on the workbench, and I have the old Sync 2 module and the new Sync 3 module sitting here together. So really the key difference between the original Sync 2 module and this new Sync 3 one in terms of mounting brackets is recessed versus flush mounting. You can see, and it is more apparent this way, this right here versus this right here. This surface is recessed below this surface. If you look at the Sync 3 module, it's all flush along the side. There's no recess. From my understanding, there are Sync 3 modules that are recessed, and you'd be able to reuse your factory brackets there. However, the ones that are not recessed are a little bit less expensive and a little bit more readily available, so on and so forth. A lot of kits have those. So in the case of mine, I needed to install new brackets. Now these came with the kit. They're little 3D printed brackets, and they install no problem, although I did have to remount the holes. If you have to do that on yours, the holes for the screws are 5/32. If you're going to remount with just a drill bit, that should work no problem. Now if we flip these over, you can see my old Sync 2 module versus the new Sync 3 one. Same connector, that connector is going to plug back in. Same USB connector, USB is going to plug back in, no problem. And then GPS antenna, from my understanding, I guess goes through the main connector here on the old module. On the new one, it's a separate deal, and that's where the whole GPS antenna comes into play on the Sync 3. So I'm going to go ahead and go back into the truck and start getting the GPS antenna, which is the separate antenna right here, set up and routed, so we can basically drop this back into the truck and start reassembly. So I'm going to go ahead, move on over there, and move forward with that. All right, so now that we're back in the interior, it is time to go ahead and pull our top speaker trim and get the GPS antenna routed and set up. So in order to do that, you need to pull the rubber mat that's up there off, set it off to the side, and there are 2 screws, one on either side. I believe they're 7mm, which they are typical for most of this interior stuff on the boards, and those will come right out. I won't bore you with taking the screws out. Basically, once those are removed, this center speaker should kind of lift up and forwards, if it's like the one that is assembled on my other truck. So I'll go ahead and lift that up, get it out of the way, and then show you what we're doing with the antenna. All right, so just as expected, lift up, move towards the windshield, and the center speaker comes out. Has a connector, obviously, for the speaker, just to push down, tab, and pull. You can brace against that part of the dash if you need to help prevent any jerk of the speaker as you remove it. Now, at this point, we have to remove the factory GPS antenna, or at least unplug it. And in the case of mine, It's just a little bracket that slides out like so. This is also the bracket that holds one of the two screws kind of in place that the screws screw into. You can see in that hole right there. So we're going to need to retain this. We need to unplug the module. From what I understand, if you leave this plugged in, it can cause the new system not to function properly. So we're going to unplug that, tape and label the wire, probably leave the module physically in place, and then install the new GPS antenna somewhere up here, or otherwise somewhere down in here. I'm just going to have to take a look at some clearances and whatnot and figure out exactly how we're going to do that. But my understanding is that the dome of the new one, the black dome, should face upwards. So we're going to make sure that we do that to the best of our ability. Alrighty, so we got the new GPS antenna installed. You can see it's right on top of the old one. That is just some 3M VHB tape holding it on. Some of the really good strong stuff. And if you look, I've got the old wiring covered and tied back, and everything slips underneath right into the stock location, just like perfect. So I'm gonna go ahead and get the wire routed, and also probably sleeved and whatnot too, just so it's protected from any abrasion. And we will basically be ready to rock and roll at that point on getting the everything buttoned back up and getting everything plugged in. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that, and then show you what our final wiring looks like before we start plugging everything in. Alrighty, so I got my wire routing figured out. I don't love having a huge bundle up here, but there's a lot of excess cable on the GPS antenna. So up here underneath the speaker is really the best place to hide it if I ever need to rewrap it or diagnose any issues with it. It's at least accessible, more so than pulling out all of this. So I've got it coiled up there, tied to factory wiring harnesses, and routed down through here, through this little pass-through, the oval-shaped pass-through right there. This is beveled on the inside edge, so it provides a little bit of strain and abrasion relief. Best place to route it that I can find. And I've got plenty enough hanging out here to do what we need to do. So at this point, I do believe we're ready to, other than cleaning stuff up, start plugging everything back in. So I'm gonna go ahead and start wiping stuff down as I reassemble, but we're ready to go ahead and put the top piece back on and then reassemble everything into here. Now reassembly should be the exact reverse of disassembly. So I'm gonna go ahead and get everything connected up in here and start getting stuff snapped a little bit back into place. And really get all of this stuff buttoned up, make sure that we're good to go. Normally I would test a stereo with the with a lot of this stuff open, but because I have an airbag out, because of all the different buttons and sensors and everything that need to be plugged back in, I basically have to button the entire thing back up in order to test everything. So fingers crossed, nothing goes wrong. But before we do any of the testing, we've got one more step to do, which is the USB port installation. So like I said, I'll get all of this buttoned up, and then if there's anything I need to cover, I'll cover it. Otherwise, next will be USB port installation. All right, well, I have the SYNC 3 unit here out of the truck, and the reason that it's not installed and everything's not being put back together is because the bracket broke upon tightening the screw. Barely torqued down on this one. This was second to the last one that I was torquing down, and it absolutely blew apart. So I think the reason for that is a couple-fold. Number one, the screws have like built-in washers, and you can see, I'll use my Torx driver here as a pointer just to make things easier to see. Right here and right here are two supports which are built into the little 3D printed bracket, which is good, but that washer collides with this support, and with the wall here. Now up on the top, it just collides with the wall and the support. These ones tighten down just fine. Didn't get to tighten this one down, and this was the first of the bottom ones that I tightened down where it exploded. So by that washer touching and forcing itself all the way down and in, that is causing the stresses in the bracket to build up such that they want to blow the bracket apart by whatever the weakest point is, which in this case was multiple and basically just exploded the bracket. There's also a torque situation going on, or rather a rotational moment situation going on, where the screw coming through the hole and tightening down onto the surface is wanting to twist the surface too. So that's wanting to just break the bracket apart like this when you're tightening it. But the other thing is the fact that these 3D printed brackets are not printed with 100% infill. These are hollowed out, looks like roughly in the 30% range. If even that, it could be even less than that. So there's parts of these that are going to be solid, but it's not the entire bracket that's solid. So what I'm going to end up having to do is, I'm sure I could hit up the vendor that I bought this from, ForSync Tech, and get a new bracket from them without too much of an issue. But in my case, I can realistically print a better bracket myself, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to print the same thing. Design files are available online for these. Print the same thing, 100% infill. Basically have a much stronger end product. Same material, PETG. So, unfortunately, this is going to take my truck down for as long as it takes me to print those parts, which I haven't sliced them yet. I don't know. I'm guessing just by looking at these, it's going to be at least 6 or 8 hours. I'm going to go ahead and print both sides, so I have strong brackets on both sides. But 6 or 8 hours puts me into tomorrow, which is when I would prefer to drive my truck. So, unfortunately, tomorrow I'm going to end up driving another one of my vehicles, which is what it is. All right, so while we're waiting for some brackets to print, I'm going to go ahead and finish up the center console and well, the rest of the installation that I can do, which is really just the USB ports that go in the center console. If you have a non-center console truck, and maybe even if you have a non-Raptor, those USB ports are down there where I had that trim piece that popped out underneath the center stack. In the case of the Raptor and maybe other console F-150s, it's right here. So all we should need to do is basically pop this thing out. What I will do before I do that is take out the Maps SD card, just so we don't damage that, because if I remember correctly, this faceplate comes off as opposed to all of the ports down underneath coming off, and you have to pry them out. But I'm going to use a plastic pry tool, which I don't happen to have in hand since I just unloaded everything out of the truck. But I'm going to use a plastic pry tool to pop this off, and then be able to pull out the USB ports and RCA jacks and everything, and then put in the new USB-USB-C combo. So let's do that. Okay, so now that we have the module out, you can see that there's 2 connectors. One of these is just like a USB combo one. One of these is a multi-wire one. That's what we have a little sub-harness for in that ForSync Tech kit. And then we have 2 ports on the back of this. You can see one of them's USB, and one of them takes a very small 4-pin connector, which is what the little harness adapts this to. So I'm going to go ahead and off camera, since I need both hands, pull those connectors out. There's just tabs for each one of them, and then get the adaptations done and show you what that looks like before we plug it all back together. Alrighty, so I have the adapter harness plugged in. You can see it just goes right there, and then excess tucks down, and then here's the USB one. So again, I'm gonna have to plug things in off camera, but like I showed you, USB's here, adapter harness goes in there, and we get our USB and USB-C now. So I'm gonna go ahead and get that plugged all back into place, and we're gonna be good to go in the console. And at this point, once I get everything set back in, all we have left is to do the stereo. Alrighty, so I'm back. I have one of the 2 new sides of brackets printed. Double checked all of the fitment and everything. Everything looks good. This is the old one. Again, this one would probably maybe function just fine, but I'm printing a new one in solid infill that'll be a little more solid anyway. Again, same material, PETG. You can tell it's a little different, just a little bit cleaner in terms of the print lines and everything off of my printer as opposed to whatever one was used to print these, especially on the back side. So we should be squared away with these. I'm going to go ahead and get this one installed onto the SYNC 3 unit, again using the same T8 Torx fasteners. I had applied Loctite to these. I'm going to reapply Loctite on reinstallation, repaint mark them and everything, make sure everything's squared away there. I'm going to go ahead and get it installed, do a little bit of pull testing, make sure everything is indeed good to go, and this passes my satisfaction test. And then the other one should be off the printer here in a few hours, and should be back in business. So I will be back tomorrow for me, and a second for y'all, and should be moving forward with putting in the new SYNC 3 unit. All right, you can see we're back. We have both new brackets attached to the new SYNC 3 unit now. These are the ones that I 3D printed. Got the old brackets back here, the broken one, the non-broken one, but this is ready to go into the truck now. So, like with previously, time to go get this buttoned up. I want to mention, one thing I did is checked fit of the factory screws. You can see one sitting in here. And they fit with mine, with the model that I printed at least, and the fact that it printed cleanly and there's not a bunch of zits hanging out of the material. They fit just barely right there in the bottom pockets, and on the top ones they fit with a tiny little bit of an angle because the washer portion hits the wall here. But that said, it should be able to tighten down without an issue on the top as well. So I'll go ahead and get this installed, and then we'll wrap up from there. All right, well, you can see the new Sync 3 system works. I've left the sticker on the screen. I got to wipe everything down before I finalize everything and get everything fully dialed in terms of cleaning up after myself. But screen's in, functions beautifully. I popped through a few of the settings and everything. Everything's perfect so far, at least. There's a couple things I haven't been able to test because I'm sitting here in my garage. I haven't started the truck up, so I haven't checked the heated and cooled seats, but the rest of the HVAC system works just fine. Phone I haven't connected to because I'm filming this handheld portion of the video on that. CarPlay I haven't tested out yet, but that should be no problem as well. That's going to be wired CarPlay, and I'm going to end up picking up a wireless module for that too, so it's a little more seamless. But if I click through everything, phone's not going to show anything. Navigation I'm not going to go to because that will show you a map of where I live. You can see the radio is working just fine. It's on one of the local radio stations here. I'm not sure if it saved presets from the previous sync system or not somehow, but I do believe those are the presets, some of which I had put in there and some of which had been put in there previously by other folks. So it's kind of interesting that those transferred over. And if we go to apps and settings, you can see we can click through that. Now we have all of the different settings and everything in here, including some that don't really apply. Ambient lighting, for example, this truck doesn't have. So actually very few of this generation F-150 had that. But I'm assuming all of that interfaces as well. Everything in here, like I said, has worked so far. So obviously if something doesn't, I'll come back and kind of go through some of that process with y'all. But I do believe everything is dialed in, set up, and ready to rock and roll. Pretty happy overall. Like I mentioned, and like you guys saw, the only hiccup was the mounting bracket issue. If you have a 3D printer, you can easily overcome that, so I wouldn't sweat it too much. If you don't, still would go for this. I'm sure that the seller that I bought from would be really good with support. I just didn't want to reach out, wait for a part to be shipped, etc. whenever I was able to print both brackets in about 6 hours. So myself. So much quicker solution for me personally. But like I said, overall, super happy. I'll definitely keep everybody updated in the comment section below as well, if there's any updates or issues or whatnot over time. But with that, I want to thank you all for watching. Let me know down in the comments below if you have any questions, comments, concerns, and I hope to see you in the next video. Take care.